The rule was simple: don't wake the humans. Everyone in the Galactic Concordat knew it. Every schoolchild, from the methane-breathing Vexarians to the silicon-based quartzites, had it drilled into their education modules. Humanity sleeps. Let them rest. The warning signs orbited Earth in 27 languages. The quarantine beacons extended 16 light-years in every direction around the Sol system. This wasn't just a suggestion, it was the foundational law that had maintained peace for over 8 centuries. Which made it particularly awkward that I, Zendar Vox, junior xenohistorian of the 3rd Academic Fleet, had just woken one up. "Hello," said the human, blinking slowly in the dim light of my research pod. Its voice had that distinctive flatness unique to their species, no harmonics, no subvocalizations, just crude sound waves shaped by meat. "Where am I? Who are you?" I froze, all 6 of my appendages locking in the universal posture of absolute terror. I'd only been scanning the outer perimeter of Cryo Complex Zeta 12, one of the thousands of sleeper facilities scattered across what they'd called the Western Spiral Arm. It was supposed to be routine research for my dissertation, dormancy patterns in pre-contact human architecture. Nothing invasive. Nothing that would trigger the awakening protocols. Yet here I was, facing the galaxy's most feared species, wide awake and looking increasingly annoyed. "I asked you a question," the human said, stretching its limbs in a way that reminded me of a carnivorous Yashin tree stalker. It had designated itself as female on its cryopod. The nameplate read, "Danny Reynolds, Deep Space Colonization Initiative." I am Zendar," I managed, my translator glitching on my fear pheromones. "You are in your sleep facility. Year 3142 by your calendar. This is very bad. Very, very bad." The human, Danny, scratched her head, a gesture I recognized from historical archives as indicating confusion rather than parasites. 3142. That's over 1,000 years after I went under. We were only supposed to sleep for the 50-year journey to Proxima b. My 4th heart began palpitating. This was getting worse by the microcycle. My research clearance only covered observation of unawakened humans. The containment protocols for awakened specimens involved 17 different government agencies and typically ended with mass sterilization of the site. Yes, well, there were complications. I began gathering my equipment, backing toward the exit. Perhaps if I reported this immediately, the damage could be contained. "You should return to your sleep chamber. The proper authorities will be notified." Danny stepped forward, and I couldn't help skittering backward. "I'm not getting back in that pod until someone explains what happened. Where's the rest of my crew? Where's Captain Novak? The colonization team?" My antennae drooped involuntarily. "They are still in suspension. As you should be. The directive is clear, don't wake the humans." She frowned. Why would there be a directive like that? We were peaceful explorers. I emitted a nervous laugh, which my translator unhelpfully converted to a sound like shattering glass. "Peaceful? Your species? The archives are quite clear on what happens when humans are awoken prematurely. The Centauri Massacre. The Mars Rebellion. The Great Purge of 2419. "I have no idea what you're talking about," Danny said, advancing another step. "The last thing I remember was boarding the colony ship in 2089. That stopped me cold." 2089. Pre-war era. "Oh, fluid-filled gods of the void, you're a human from before the Ascension conflicts." "What war? What conflicts?" She looked increasingly agitated, which the emergency manual strictly warned against allowing. Agitated humans were only one step away from what the guide termed problem-solving mode, apparently the most dangerous state a human could enter. My communications implant chimed, and Admiral Quirks's voice filled my head. "Researcher Vox, your pod sensors indicate unauthorized life signs. Explain immediately. I tried to project calm. Minor technical issue, Admiral. Nothing to. Is that a human? Danny asked loudly, pointing at the holographic insignia that had appeared above my upper appendage. Are you talking to another alien right now? The Admiral's voice became ice. Vox. Have you awakened a human? Before I could answer, Danny reached over and pressed what she must have thought was a communication device on my exoskeleton. Instead, she activated my emergency beacon, the one that broadcast on all frequencies across 17 systems. Hello, she said directly into my thoracic amplifier. This is colonization specialist Danny Reynolds of Earth. I seem to have been awakened from cryosleep by this person, and would appreciate some straight answers. The absolute silence that followed was broken only by the sound of my career imploding. Within 6 hours, the quarantine zone around the facility stretched for miles. The academic fleet had been joined by military vessels from 8 different species, all maintaining a safe orbit. I had been debriefed 14 times, each interrogator more horrified than the last. You were taking readings, General Claxtour of the Defensive Council growled, his plasma rifle never quite pointing away from me. How did that lead to awakening a human? I believe my scanner's resonance frequency may have disrupted the cryo field, I explained for the 15th time. The facility is very old. The technology is primitive. What's primitive is your understanding of protocol, snapped Science Director Fixus. We study humans from a distance of no less than 12 meters. Everyone knows this. The human seems quite docile, I ventured. Perhaps this situation can be contained. The assembled officials exchanged glances that suggested I might be the most naive researcher in galactic history. It's not about one human, Admiral Quirks said gravely. It's about the cascade effect. The human you awakened has already attempted to access the facility's central computer 27 times. She's trying to wake the others. My exoskeleton nearly cracked from the sudden rush of terror. But the facility is isolated. The systems are ancient. You don't understand humans, General Claxtour rumbled. Give them a problem, and they obsess. Give them a locked door, and they invent 15 ways to open it. Give them a computer system, no matter how ancient, and they will eventually make it sing and dance. A junior communications officer burst into the debriefing chamber. Admiral. We're detecting power fluctuations across the facility. Multiple cryopods are showing activation sequences. The room erupted in panic. I sank into my support chair as alarms blared throughout the station. On the monitors, I watched as Danny Reynolds stood in the facility's control room, surrounded by flickering holographic displays. She wasn't frantically working the controls or shouting commands. No, she was simply standing there, arms crossed, watching with satisfaction as the ancient systems followed her instructions. Through the speaker came her voice, unervingly calm. Turns out your password security was just the colony ship's original launch date. Pretty easy to figure out once I saw the architecture. She tapped a final command. There. Wake-up protocols initiated for all 5,000 colonists. The galactic representatives around me descended into chaos, shouting evacuation orders and containment protocols. I remained frozen, watching the monitor as another human stepped into view beside Danny, then another, and another. So, said a newly awakened human, reading from what appeared to be our own briefing documents on a display. Apparently, the number 1 rule of the galaxy is, don't wake the humans. Interesting. Why is that, do you think? Danny shrugged, the gesture horrifyingly casual given the circumstances. Not sure yet. But I'm getting the feeling we're about to find out. As the evacuation sirens wailed and the officials scrambled for their ships, I couldn't help but think that my dissertation was about to need a significant revision. Assuming, of course, there was still a galactic academic system left when this was over. Here's a slightly shorter version of part 2. The quarantine zone around Cryo Complex Zeta-12 had expanded to cover half the continent. 17 warships from the Galactic Concordat hovered in low orbit, weapons trained on the facility. I was no longer a disgraced researcher, I had been promoted to official liaison to the humans. Not because of any diplomatic skill on my part, but simply because I was the only one who'd had a conversation with a human and survived. They want to know why you're building a transmitter, I explained to Danny, trying to keep my voice steady. The Admiral is concerned you're trying to contact other human facilities. We are, Danny said, not looking up from the schematic. Obviously. You can't do that. All 6 of my appendages flailed in distress. Danny finally looked at me, one eyebrow raised. Why not? There are supposed to be 12 other colony ships out there. Our friends and families might be on them. Because the entire galaxy has spent centuries maintaining the quarantine. The sleeping arrangement. From across the room, another human, Dr. Leo Jenkins, snorted. Yeah, about that. Still waiting on an explanation for why the galaxy decided to put us in timeout for a millennium. I shifted uncomfortably. It's complicated. Try us, said Captain Elena Vasquez, their de facto leader. We've been awake for 3 days now, and all we've gotten are vague warnings and threats of sterilization. Your species, I began cautiously, is uniquely disruptive. Leo laughed. That's not an explanation. After your initial expansion into space, humanity made contact with 17 different species within 50 years. Every single encounter ended in either war, political upheaval, or complete restructuring of the contacted society. We're not that bad, Danny protested. You introduced the concept of labor unions to the Hive Collective of Rigel. Their 10,000-year-old social structure collapsed in 6 months. You gave faster-than-light technology to the quantum dynasties of Betelgeuse. Within 3 years, they'd initiated 4 colonial wars. You introduced the Sith era to the concept of fiction. That stopped them. Leo tilted his head. And they had no concept of deliberate falsehood before meeting humans. Your entertainment caused a philosophical crisis that nearly drove them extinct. The humans exchanged glances. So the galaxy put us in timeout because we didn't follow your rules? Leo asked incredulously. No, I said. We put you in timeout because you kept making better ones. Admiral Quirks's hologram appeared, his tentacles writhing with barely contained anxiety. Vox, what progress have you made in convincing the humans to return to suspension? Before I could answer, Captain Vasquez stepped forward. No progress at all. We've decided we're quite done with napping. This is not negotiable, human. Return to suspension, or we will be forced to take action. What action would that be? She asked calmly. Destroying the facility? Killing 5,000 colonists who did nothing wrong except wake up? If necessary, the Admiral replied coldly. Danny stepped into view. Before you make that decision, you might want to know we've established contact with colony ship Delta. They're waking up as we speak. The Admiral's carapace turned ashen. Impossible. Was designed by people who went to sleep in 2089, Leo interjected. Your updates to the quarantine technology were primitive. You've awakened another colony. And they're waking Gamma, who will wake Epsilon, and so on, Danny confirmed with a smile that contained too many teeth. Admiral Quirks's hologram flickered as he suffered some kind of circulatory event. This is an act of war. Captain Vasquez shook her head. No, this is an act of getting out of bed. The Admiral cut the transmission. The facility's sensors indicated the warships were powering up weapons. They're going to fire, I whispered in horror. No, they won't, Captain Vasquez said with unnerving confidence. We found something interesting in the old colony ship databanks. Apparently, before everyone decided to put us to sleep, humanity had developed some impressive defensive technology. The doomsday protocols, I gasped. But those were theoretical. We didn't need to deploy them, Danny explained. The galaxy decided to negotiate instead. But we kept the plans. On the main screen, a schematic showed a network of satellites activating around the planet. We've reactivated the planetary defense grid, Captain Vasquez said. Non-lethal, of course. Any ship that fires on this facility will find itself taking a very long journey back to wherever it came from, without its weapons systems. As if on cue, the warships powered down. 3 months later, I stood before the Galactic Council, delivering my report on the human reawakening. The human integration has begun. Their representatives have agreed to certain limitations on technology sharing and cultural exchange protocols. In return, we've acknowledged their right to exist awake. And the other facilities? Asked Counselor P.H. Thrax. Approximately 60% of known human sleeper facilities have initiated revival protocols, I admitted. And what of the incidents? Another counselor asked delicately. There have been 17 major innovations introduced by humans in the past 3 months. Most notably, they've suggested reorganizing the interstellar trade routes that have been unchanged for 12,000 years. On what grounds? Demanded a representative from the Commerce Guild. Efficiency, I replied. Their model reduces transit time by 43%. The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. My communication implant chimed. It was Danny. How's it going? Are they freaking out? Of course they're freaking out. You've suggested altering the very foundations of galactic society. Only the parts that don't work well, she replied cheerfully. By the way, we found references to something called the coming darkness in some of the oldest sealed files. Ring any bells? It did. An ancient prophecy, dismissed as superstition. Just old legends. Funny, that's what they said about us, Danny replied. Anyway, we've got some theories we'd like to discuss. As she disconnected, I looked back at the chamber of bickering representatives. For the first time, I wondered if perhaps the old Concordat had made a mistake. Maybe we hadn't been protecting the galaxy from humans. Maybe we'd been protecting humans from what was coming. But that was a terrifying thought for another day. For now, I had a galaxy to help prepare for the greatest disruption in its history, humanity, wide awake and full of questions. And no one had even told them yet about what happened to their coffee plants during the Great Agricultural Redistribution of 2533. That conversation alone might trigger an actual war. 6 months after the human reawakening, I stood with Danny and Captain Vasquez at Earth's newly established Defense Command Center. Around us, holographic displays showed the unthinkable, a massive fleet of unknown vessels approaching from the galactic rim. So this is what the old Concordat feared, I whispered, watching the swarm of ships that had already devoured 3 outer systems. The coming darkness, Danny nodded. They put us to sleep not because we were disruptive, but because they knew humanity would fight, Captain Vasquez finished, studying the tactical displays. While the Concordat solution was to hide and hope it passed them by. The emergency channel erupted with panicked transmissions from Concordat worlds. The same species that had feared human unpredictability now begged for it. The old files say your species had a plan, I said. Something even the doomsday protocols were just a precursor to. Leo appeared in the doorway, grinning. Found it. Project Prometheus. It's exactly as insane as you'd expect from humans. Will it work? I asked. Danny gave me that same too-many-teeth smile from our first meeting. Probably not. But that's never stopped us before. As the alarms blared and humanity prepared for war, I realized the galaxy's greatest mistake wasn't waking the humans. It was ever letting them fall asleep in the first place.